Nobody ever wrote this chapter into the legend of Elvis Presley. The newspapers never printed it. The television cameras never captured it. The screaming fans who filled arenas across America never imagined that one ordinary night would become more dangerous than every concert Elvis had ever performed. For years, people believed Elvis fought only exhaustion, fame, loneliness, and the impossible weight of being the king of rock and roll. But there was one night, one forgotten night, when the greatest performance of his life happened without music, without lights, without applause. Only darkness, only rain, and a secret that should have stayed buried forever. It was the summer of 1968. Memphis still breathed Elvis Presley. His songs echoed from diners, his face smiled from record stores. Children copied his hairstyle. Teenagers dreamed of becoming him. Adults argued about whether another man like Elvis could ever exist. The answer was always the same. Never. That evening, more than 20,000 fans had packed the arena hours before the concert even began. People had traveled across states. Some had slept in their cars. Others had sold precious belongings just to buy a ticket. When Elvis stepped beneath the lights wearing his brilliant white stage suit, the building erupted like thunder. The first note silenced every conversation. The second note stole every breath. By the final song, thousands were crying openly. Flowers covered the stage. Letters poured from every direction. Children reached toward him. Parents lifted their daughters onto their shoulders, hoping Elvis would notice them for just 1 second. As always, he smiled. He waved. He thanked everyone. But behind that famous smile, something felt strangely different. Several times during the concert, Elvis glanced toward the back entrance of the arena, almost instinctively, as if someone invisible stood there, watching, waiting. He couldn't explain why. He simply felt it. Even after the final applause faded, that strange feeling refused to leave. Close to midnight, Elvis finally left alone. He often enjoyed driving by himself after concerts. No manager, no bodyguards, no reporters. Just the quiet humming of his beloved white Cadillac and empty Tennessee roads stretching into darkness. Rain had begun falling gently. Streetlights reflected across the wet pavement like rivers of gold. The city slowly disappeared behind him. Radio stations faded into static. Only the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers remained. For the first time that day, everything felt peaceful. Then, the engine coughed. Once, twice. A violent metallic grinding noise echoed beneath the hood. Warning lights flashed across the dashboard. The steering wheel trembled. Smoke burst from the front of the Cadillac. Elvis immediately eased onto the shoulder. The engine died. Silence. Complete silence. He stepped outside. The cool night air smelled of wet asphalt and burning oil. Steam escaped from beneath the hood. He opened it carefully. Nothing looked obviously broken, but something definitely wasn't right. He had owned enough cars to recognize ordinary engine trouble. This was different, almost as if someone had tampered with it. He looked around. There were no houses nearby, no passing traffic, no telephone booth. Only darkness stretching in every direction. Then, far ahead, he noticed a faint yellow light, barely visible. It flickered through the rain. An old roadside garage. Its weathered sign swung slowly in the wind. Half the letters had fallen away years earlier. The place looked forgotten by time itself. Yet the light was still on. Elvis climbed back inside the silent Cadillac. Using the remaining momentum, he carefully rolled the heavy car toward the garage. The tires crunched over loose gravel. The garage door stood half open. Inside, tools hung neatly across faded wooden walls. Shelves overflowed with engine parts, old radios, rusty chains, oil cans. Dust floated lazily through the yellow light. Someone was still working. A young mechanic emerged from beneath an old pickup truck. He wiped grease from his hands with a worn cloth. He looked up. His eyes widened for just a heartbeat. Of course, he recognized Elvis Presley. Everyone did. But instead of asking for an autograph, instead of freezing in disbelief, instead of shouting for excitement, he calmly walked toward the smoking Cadillac. "You've got engine trouble," he said. His voice remained steady, professional, respectful. Elvis smiled slightly. "You recognized me?" The mechanic nodded. "I did. You aren't going to ask for a picture?" The young man shook his head. "No, sir." Elvis laughed softly. "Why not?" The mechanic looked at the smoking engine. "Because right now, your car needs me more than my wall needs another photograph." For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Elvis smiled wider than he had all evening. It was genuine, real. "You know," Elvis said quietly, "I like you already." The mechanic introduced himself simply as Daniel. He couldn't have been older than 25. His hands were scarred from years of hard work. His clothes were stained with oil. But everything in the garage was perfectly organized. Every wrench, every screwdriver, every bolt. Nothing lay out of place. It reminded Elvis of military discipline. Daniel lifted the hood completely. He leaned over the engine. Immediately, his expression changed. He frowned. Elvis noticed. "What is it?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed a flashlight. He aimed it deeper into the engine compartment. His eyebrows slowly narrowed. "That's strange." "What?" "These weld marks." Elvis stepped closer. "What about them?" Daniel traced several uneven lines across the metal. "They aren't factory work." Elvis blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone opened this section years ago, and then sealed it again." Elvis stared silently. "I've owned this Cadillac for years." Daniel nodded. "I believe you." "So who opened it?" Daniel slowly shook his head. "I don't know." Rain continued tapping softly against the garage roof. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the distant sky. The atmosphere suddenly felt heavier, as though the building itself had begun holding its breath. Daniel reached for another tool. Very carefully, he removed several hidden bolts. Then another. Then another. Finally, a thin steel plate loosened. It shouldn't have existed. Not inside that engine. Not anywhere. Daniel slowly lifted it free. Behind it, something rested inside a narrow hidden compartment. A small steel box, completely covered in dust. Its surface was scratched by age. No markings, no numbers, no manufacturer. Just an ordinary box. Hidden where no ordinary person would ever think to look. Neither man moved. Neither spoke. Rain echoed outside. Tick, tick, tick. Water dripped somewhere inside the garage. Daniel swallowed. I've repaired thousands of engines. I've never seen anything like this. He carefully lifted the box. It was surprisingly heavy. He handed it to Elvis. I think this belongs to you. Elvis turned it over slowly. Cold metal, rust around the hinges, an old lock that had already broken from age. His heartbeat became strangely louder. He couldn't explain why. It felt personal, almost familiar, even though he had never seen it before. He looked at Daniel. What do you think is inside? Daniel smiled nervously. Honestly, I don't think we're about to find spare parts. Elvis couldn't help laughing. The tension broke for only a moment. He took a slow breath, placed both hands on the lid, and gently opened the forgotten steel box. Inside lay an old black and white photograph, a rusted iron key, and a folded letter, its edges stained by time. Across one corner, a dark crimson mark remained. It looked almost like dried blood. The smile disappeared from Elvis's face. Very carefully, he unfolded the fragile paper. Only one sentence had been written. Nothing more, no signature, no explanation. Just 7 chilling words that froze the air inside the garage. If Elvis Presley finds this box, it means they have returned. Elvis's hands stopped moving. The color drained from his face. Daniel looked from the letter to Elvis and back again. Neither man spoke. Outside, the rain suddenly stopped. An unnatural silence settled over the old garage. Then, a pair of headlights appeared beyond the doorway. Another followed. Then another. 3 black automobiles rolled slowly through the darkness. They stopped together, engines idling, doors unopened, as if whoever sat inside already knew exactly where Elvis Presley was. Daniel whispered without taking his eyes off the entrance. They're here. 3 black cars, 9 armed men, 1 forgotten garage. The rain had stopped so suddenly that the silence felt unnatural. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The engines of the 3 black sedans purred outside like hungry predators waiting for permission to strike. Inside the garage, only the soft ticking of the Cadillac's cooling engine could be heard. Daniel's eyes never left the entrance. His face had changed completely. The calm mechanic who had welcomed Elvis only minutes earlier had disappeared. Now he looked like a man who had just recognized an old nightmare. Elvis slowly folded the mysterious letter and slipped it back into the steel box. His voice remained calm. Do you know who they are? Daniel swallowed. No. A pause. But I know men like them. Outside, the driver's door of the first black sedan slowly opened. A polished leather shoe stepped onto the wet pavement, then another. A tall man dressed entirely in black emerged from the darkness. Long black coat, black gloves, perfectly combed hair. No emotion, no hesitation. He wasn't dressed like a criminal. He looked more like someone attending an expensive business meeting, except for the pistol hanging at his side. Behind him, the remaining doors opened one after another. More men stepped out, disciplined, silent, each one carrying a weapon. Not one of them spoke. Not one looked nervous. They moved with the confidence of people who had done this many times before. Daniel counted quickly. 9. Elvis looked at him. 9? Daniel nodded. 9 outside. Which usually means at least one more watching from somewhere else. Elvis looked through the rain-covered window. You telling me they planned this? Daniel answered quietly. They always do. The leader stopped several feet from the garage entrance. He didn't point his gun. He didn't shout. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a friendly man. It was the smile of someone who already believed he had won. His deep voice echoed across the empty road. Good evening, Mr. Presley. Elvis stepped forward. I don't believe we've met. The man tilted his head slightly. No, but we've been expecting you. Daniel's fingers tightened around a heavy steel wrench. The stranger's eyes noticed immediately. Relax, mechanic. We're not here for you. His gaze shifted toward Elvis. We only want the box. Silence. The stranger continued. Give us the steel box. And Elvis Presley walks away alive. Rainwater dripped from the garage roof. Nobody answered. The leader sighed. I was hoping this would be easy. Elvis slowly stepped in front of Daniel. The young mechanic whispered urgently, There's a back door. We can leave now. I know these roads. They'll never catch us. Daniel gently reached toward Elvis's arm, but Elvis didn't move. Instead, he shook his head, very slowly. No. Daniel stared at him. What? Elvis looked at the frightened mechanic. For a moment, the famous singer disappeared. There was no celebrity, no legend. Only a man making a choice. My whole life, people have stood in front of danger for me. My family, my friends, my fans, my security. He looked toward the armed men. Tonight, it's my turn. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but no words came, because he realized Elvis wasn't pretending to be brave. He simply had already made his decision. Outside, the leader checked his watch. I'm losing my patience. Elvis answered loudly enough for every man outside to hear. Then maybe you should have come earlier. Several armed men exchanged confused looks. The leader smiled again. You still think this is about you? It isn't. He pointed toward the steel box. That box contains something buried almost 20 years ago. Something powerful men have murdered to protect. It was never supposed to be found. He looked directly into Elvis's eyes. And now you opened it. Elvis replied calmly. Then maybe it was meant to be found. The smile disappeared from the leader's face. He nodded once, then quietly spoke a single word. Take it. Everything exploded into motion. The first gunshot shattered the garage window. Glass burst across the concrete floor. Daniel grabbed Elvis and pulled him behind an old pickup truck. Another bullet slammed into a tool cabinet. Metal screamed. Thousands of bolts, screws, and wrenches rained across the floor. The garage instantly became chaos. A second attacker rushed through the front entrance. Daniel reacted first. He kicked a rolling mechanic's stool directly into the man's legs. The attacker crashed forward. Before he could recover, Elvis grabbed a heavy steel pipe leaning against the wall. Without hesitation, He swung. Clang! The pipe struck the attacker's weapon, sending it spinning across the garage. The man staggered backward. Another swing caught him across the shoulder. He collapsed into a stack of tires. Two more attackers entered from opposite sides. Daniel shouted, "Lift!" Elvis turned just in time. A crowbar sliced through the air where his head had been moments before. He ducked instinctively. The attacker lost balance. Elvis drove his shoulder into the man's chest. Both crashed into a wooden workbench. The table exploded into splinters. Oil cans rolled across the floor. One burst open. Black motor oil spread like ice across the concrete. Another attacker sprinted toward Daniel. The young mechanic ripped a heavy chain from a wall hook. With one powerful swing, the steel chain wrapped around the man's arm. Daniel yanked with everything he had. The attacker flew sideways, straight into an engine hoist. The massive metal frame toppled. Boom! The impact shook the entire garage. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, more men were moving. They weren't rushing anymore. They were surrounding the building, blocking every exit. The leader calmly watched through the broken doorway. He wasn't worried. He knew numbers eventually defeated courage. He simply waited, like a hunter waiting for exhausted prey. Inside, Daniel breathed heavily. "We can't stay." Elvis nodded. "I know. But how do we leave?" Daniel's eyes suddenly landed on the overhead crane mounted along the garage ceiling. A huge automobile engine still hung suspended above the work area. An idea flashed through his mind. He sprinted toward the control switch. The attackers noticed immediately. "Stop him!" 3 men charged. Elvis intercepted them. He grabbed a long steel bar from the floor. The first attacker swung a knife. Elvis blocked. Sparks exploded as steel struck steel. He twisted the bar sharply. The knife flew from the man's hand. A spinning elbow knocked the attacker unconscious. The second man tackled Elvis. Both slammed into the Cadillac. The hidden steel box slid across the seat. For one terrifying second, the box nearly fell out the open door. Elvis lunged desperately. His fingertips caught it. The attacker punched him across the jaw. Blood appeared at the corner of Elvis's mouth. He barely noticed. His only concern was protecting the box. Behind them, Daniel reached the crane controls. His grease-covered hand slammed the lever forward. The ancient electric motor groaned to life. The massive suspended engine began moving, slowly, then faster, swinging across the garage like a giant pendulum. The attackers looked up too late. The enormous engine crashed directly into 2 armed men. They were thrown violently across the floor. Another dove away just in time. The swinging engine smashed into the front support beam. The entire garage trembled. Wood cracked, concrete fractured. Dust exploded into the air. For several seconds, nobody could see anything. Daniel coughed through the dust. "Elvis! I'm here! This way!" Hidden by the collapsing debris, they sprinted toward the rear exit. Behind them, the leader finally stepped inside. His polished shoes crunched across broken glass. He looked around the destroyed garage. His face remained expressionless. Then, he noticed the open back door moving gently in the wind. He smiled. "They're running." He calmly picked up a radio. "Phase 2. There was only static. Then a voice answered. "They're heading for the highway." The leader replied, "Excellent." They're driving exactly where we want them. Outside the back of the garage, the white Cadillac roared back to life. Daniel stared in disbelief. "I thought the engine was dead." Elvis smiled, despite the blood on his face. "So did I." The V8 engine thundered into the night. The tires screamed across the wet pavement. Mud sprayed behind them. Within seconds, the Cadillac disappeared into the darkness. Behind them, the three black sedans ignited their engines almost simultaneously. Their headlights pierced the rain. One after another, they accelerated. The hunt had only just begun. Ahead lay narrow bridges, flooded roads, and a deadly chase through the sleeping Tennessee night. And neither Elvis nor Daniel realized the mysterious key inside the steel box wasn't the only secret hidden there. Folded beneath the old photograph was a second piece of paper, one that neither of them had noticed, one that would change everything. The white Cadillac tore through the rain like a ghost. Its powerful engine roared across the empty Tennessee highway while three black sedans chased relentlessly behind, their headlights slicing through the darkness. Inside the Cadillac, neither man spoke. Daniel gripped the dashboard tightly. Elvis focused on the winding road ahead. The mysterious steel box rested on the passenger seat. It looked harmless, small, old, forgotten. Yet men were willing to die for it, and kill for it. A loud explosion shattered the silence. Bang! The rear windshield burst inward. Glass exploded across the back seat. Daniel instinctively ducked. "They're shooting!" Another bullet struck the trunk. Then another. The black sedans closed the distance. One accelerated beside them. Its driver suddenly jerked the steering wheel. The heavy sedan slammed into the Cadillac's side. Crash! The entire car lurched violently. The tires screamed across the soaked pavement. For one terrifying moment, the Cadillac slid sideways toward the edge of a steep ravine. Daniel shut his eyes. This is it. But Elvis refused to panic. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Years of driving powerful cars took over. Instead of fighting the skid, he turned into it. The tires finally found traction. The Cadillac snapped back onto the highway. Barely. Only inches separated them from the cliff. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Elvis. I've never seen anyone control a car like that. Elvis gave a faint smile. I wasn't about to let tonight end in the ditch. The chase continued. Rain hammered the windshield. Lightning illuminated the countryside for only a heartbeat at a time. Then, darkness again. Suddenly, Daniel remembered the folded map inside the steel box. He unfolded it across his knees. One location had been circled in faded red ink, an abandoned railroad depot, almost forgotten by the world. It has to be there, Daniel whispered. What? The key. He held up the rusted key. This key wasn't hidden for decoration. It opened something. Elvis nodded. Then that's where we're going. Several miles later, the old railroad depot finally emerged from the darkness. Broken windows, rusted tracks disappearing into weeds, collapsed warehouses. Everything looked abandoned decades earlier. Elvis drove through the broken entrance gate. The Cadillac finally stopped beside a massive steel building. The black sedans were still coming. They had only minutes. Daniel jumped out first. His flashlight swept across the enormous rusted doors. Then he saw it. A keyhole. hidden beneath years of rust. His hands trembled as he inserted the old key. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, click. The ancient locking mechanism released. The giant steel doors slowly groaned open. Their echoes rolled through the empty depot like distant thunder. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, no stacks of money. Instead, shelf after shelf filled the enormous warehouse. Hundreds of boxes, thousands of documents, photographs, film reels, audio recordings, handwritten journals, everything perfectly preserved. Daniel stared in disbelief. My God. Elvis slowly picked up one dusty folder. Inside were photographs. Powerful businessmen, corrupt officials, violent criminals. Famous faces standing beside people who had disappeared years earlier. Another folder contained bank records. Another, secret agreements. Another, evidence of murders disguised as accidents. One shelf alone contained enough proof to destroy an empire built on fear. Elvis whispered, "This wasn't hidden to protect money. It was hidden to protect the truth." Headlights suddenly flooded through the broken warehouse windows. "They're here." The black sedans screeched to a stop outside. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concrete. The leader entered first, still perfectly calm, still wearing the same cold expression. He slowly applauded. "Congratulations. You found it." His eyes drifted across the shelves. "Do you have any idea what you're looking at?" Elvis answered, "The truth." The man smiled. "No. You're looking at history. And history belongs to whoever survives." He slowly raised his pistol. "Unfortunately, you won't." Gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped through wooden shelves, boxes exploded. Thousands of classified documents scattered through the air like snow. Daniel shoved Elvis behind a thick steel pillar. More bullets struck the metal. Sparks showered around them. The warehouse became chaos. Attackers rushed from every direction. Elvis grabbed a heavy iron bar lying beside an old freight cart. The first man reached him. Elvis swung. The iron bar crashed against the attacker's weapon. The pistol flew away. A second swing sent the man crashing into stacked crates. Another attacker lunged. Elvis blocked the knife with the steel bar before driving a powerful punch into the man's chest. The attacker stumbled backward. The fight spread across the warehouse. Crates overturned, chains swung wildly. Old machinery crashed to the ground. The sound echoed like artillery. Daniel spotted an emergency control panel. Above them, an enormous freight crane still hung from the warehouse ceiling. An idea flashed through his mind. He sprinted toward the controls. The leader noticed immediately. "Stop him!" Two gunmen turned toward Daniel. One fired. The bullet struck the concrete inches from his feet. Daniel kept running. He reached the controls, pulled the main lever. The ancient crane shuddered awake. Its steel hook raced along the ceiling rails. Suspended beneath it hung a massive locomotive engine awaiting restoration. The attackers looked up. Too late. Daniel released the safety lock. The gigantic engine dropped. Boom! The floor shook violently. The falling engine crushed several attackers' escape route and blocked the center of the warehouse. Dust exploded everywhere. The building trembled. Only the leader remained. He calmly stepped over the rubble, his pistol aimed directly at Elvis. "You've caused enough trouble." He squeezed the trigger. Everything happened in less than a heartbeat. Daniel saw it first. Without thinking, he threw himself forward. Bang! The bullet struck Daniel in the shoulder. The force knocked him to the ground. "No!" Elvis dropped beside him. Blood spread rapidly across Daniel's shirt. Daniel struggled to breathe. "You can't let them keep those files." His voice faded. Elvis pressed both hands against the wound. "Stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay with me." For the first time that night, tears filled Elvis Presley's eyes. Not because he was afraid, but because someone he had known for less than an hour had willingly sacrificed his own life to save his. The leader laughed softly. "Touching." He began walking toward them, slowly, confidently, certain victory belonged to him. Elvis gently laid Daniel against the floor. He stood. His tears disappeared. Only determination remained. His voice became quiet, almost frighteningly calm. "You made one mistake." The leader smirked. "And what's that?" Elvis took one slow step forward. "You thought I was only a singer." The leader fired again. Elvis ducked. The bullet shattered a hanging light. Darkness swallowed half the warehouse. Elvis closed the distance. One powerful punch knocked the pistol from the man's hand. The leader swung wildly. Elvis blocked, countered. Another punch. Another. Years of athletic training, discipline, and countless hours performing under impossible pressure had made him stronger than anyone expected. The fight became brutal. Both men crashed through wooden crates. Steel chains swung overhead. The leader grabbed a broken pipe. Elvis caught his wrist, twisted. The pipe clattered across the floor. The leader charged one last time. Elvis sidestepped. Using the man's own momentum, he drove him into an iron support column. The impact echoed through the warehouse. The leader collapsed, unable to stand. Elvis held him there until the distant sound of police sirens filled the night. Blue and red lights flashed through the broken windows. It was over, at last. The investigation lasted for months. Every document inside the warehouse was examined. Every recording was verified. Every hidden crime began coming to light. Corrupt officials resigned. Powerful criminals were arrested. Families who had spent years searching for answers finally learned the truth. Justice had arrived, even if it had come decades late. Daniel survived. After several surgeries and months of recovery, he returned to the small roadside garage where everything had begun. His shoulder carried the scar forever. He never considered it a burden. He called it a reminder. Several months later, Elvis stood once again beneath brilliant stage lights. Thousands of fans filled the arena. The applause was deafening. He began singing. Halfway through the performance, he suddenly lowered the microphone. The music stopped. The audience fell silent. Elvis looked across the sea of faces, then quietly said, "Most people believe that fame changes a man." He smiled. "I learned something different." He paused. "The greatest people in this world are often the ones whose names nobody knows." The crowd listened without making a sound. "A few months ago, I met a mechanic. He didn't ask for my autograph. He didn't ask for a photograph. He simply wanted to help someone whose car had broken down." Elvis's voice grew softer. "That night, people may someday believe I saved his life. He slowly shook his head. The truth is, he saved something far more valuable. He saved my faith in humanity. For several seconds, no one moved. Then one person stood, then another, then another. Within moments, every single person inside the arena was on their feet. Thunderous applause filled the building. Many wiped tears from their eyes, because they finally understood something that legends rarely reveal. A man does not become unforgettable because of the songs he sings, or the crowds that cheer his name. He becomes unforgettable because, when darkness arrives and no cameras are watching, he chooses courage over fear, truth over silence, and another person's life over his own. That was the night Elvis Presley stopped being remembered only as the king of rock and roll and became the hero of a story that almost disappeared forever.